and welcome back to Chapter 11 of Masterquest Theater,
featuring Castlevania 2,
Simon's Quest, and the book Worlds of Power, Castlevania 2,
Simon's Quest,
by FX9.
When we last left our heroes.
What the shit were they doing?
When we last left our heroes,
Yes?
They were exploring the Berkeley Mansion.
Yes.
Dear reader, they had found an arrowhead that, when held to their mystical orb, granted them strange powers of illuminating the darkness and revealing walls that were invisible.
Yes, I remember now.
Prior to the end of Chapter 10, they were greeted by the voice of a witch with gender identity issues.
Well,
which is to say, I read her voice like a man, then skipped ahead a chapter and read that she was a woman, and then read her voice like a woman.
Well, it says at the end, came a cackling voice like something out of a rest home for witches.
I thought there could be man-witches. Like there could be sandwiches, there could be man-witches.
Excellent. Without further ado, Chapter 11, titled Miss Ezodorata. And Ben will continue playing. The next chamber was not the stark cellar room that Tim Bradley had expected, far from it. Instead, it looked as though they had just knocked down the wall of Ye Old Curiosity Shop. At the very least, it seemed to be some sort of room filled with antique chairs, lamps, mirrors, knickknacks, doodads, and whatnots, to say nothing of whatsits. Fuh. At the very middle of the room, sitting in a creaky old rocker, was a creaky old lady with a very large black cat square in the middle of her ample lap, purring as if it was petted. Were you distracted by the thoughts of this old lady's ample lap? Woo, moving blocks. Come in, you two! Was that because you fell, or because of the voice?
That's because there are invisible blocks. Continue reading.
Come in, you two! I'm not going to bite, I promise! She said with a reassuring matronly smile. I can't thank you enough for knocking down that stupid silly wall! I was just thinking about trying to start chipping away of it with these sweet little antique sledgehammers over there. That wouldn't have been very ladylike now, would it? And obviously I'm doing a very ladylike voice. Your face says millions. Even though she was old and wrinkled, Ben fell over and got a game over. Even though she was old and wrinkled, she was somehow very pretty, with a wealth of blonde curls above her head and a set of healthy white teeth behind a brilliant smile. Her eyes were bright blue. She fairly glowed with kindness, only dimmed by the paleness of being inside for so long. Tim liked her immediately. He had the feeling that not only was she no harm to them, she might even be of help. Oh man, you're next to an old lady right now. That's what those old ladies that, the purple one walking back and forth after your corpse. I think that's the old lady that we're talking about. Simon evidently had the same impression. Tim could sense him relaxing his guard. However do you find yourself down here, madam? He asked politely. If Simon had been wearing a hat, Tim suspected that the valiant hero would have taken it off. The old woman's eyes fairly glittered with good humor. Well now, there's an interesting story for you. But first things first. My name is Ezodorata Perkins. That is Ezodorata, which is going to be really hard to pronounce. Why is your face like that? Is it because of my voice? Oh, no, it's... Why don't you just remember which blocks are invisible? Why don't you just... That's water, Ben. Anyway, Tim and Simon introduced themselves. Simon Belmont! Well, hush my puppies! You wouldn't remember this, but I dandled you on my knee when you were just knee-high to a bat. Ezodorata put her hand up to her mouth. Oh dear, how unfortunate a term, especially in these circumstances. Go ahead with your story, urged Tim. Go ahead with your story, urged Tim. I forgot to do his voice. Shit. Oh Oh dear, of course. Fuck, I'm mixing it up. How I do go on sometimes, she giggled almost girlishly. You must understand that I am the caretaker of Berkeley Mansion. Caretaker? Said Tim, unable to hide his surprise. Immediately, he was embarrassed about his blurting out, but by the look of amusement in Esmeralda Perkins' eyes, he could see that she didn't take it as an insult. Not what you think, Tim. You see, I take care of that Berkeley Mansion looks ramshackle. I distribute the cobwebs, the dust, and the clutter just so. A work of art, I say, that it took years to get this way. And now, that rascal Dracula, has me locked down here, unable to appreciate my own handiwork. However, thanks to you, I am now free again. I can go up and drift through my lovely rooms and enjoy the delightful dilapidation. That's all very well and good, Esmeralda Perkins, said Simon. However, we must tell you that we are on a very important quest. Oh, yes, of course. You must be after the rib of Dracula. Well, it's downstairs, and you're welcome to it as far as I'm concerned. It's caused me nothing but a headache. The way it pounds on its drum sometimes. Pounds on a drum, said Tim, obviously in a different voice. My Tim and my Esmeralda are quite similar, aren't they?
Pretty much the same character.
Yes, well, it doesn't have much else to do, being just a rib and all. And I must say, it must feel a bit isolated without the rest of Dracula to keep it company. So it's got this silly drum, and sometimes it pounds on it. What do you think? Maybe it reminds it of the beat of its owner. I wouldn't think that Dracula had a heart, said Tim. Oh, yes. Oh, yes, and that is one of the things we must find, said Simon. A heart, yes, but definitely a very black heart. Yes, well, I dare say, said Esmeralda. None of my business, but anything I can do against Count Dracula will do my heart good. How can you help us, then? Asked Simon. Let me see. Esmeralda stroked her double chin. Well, for starters, I can tell you how to get down safely to where the rib is located. I suppose I might give you what you need to take the rib safely. Tricky business at best, that. And mind you, Count Dracula's minions may be stupid, but the Count himself isn't. He set up some kind of safeguard for his rib. We are prepared. Sorry, cat, but you're going to have to get off, said Esmeralda, gently lifting the fat cat from her lap, placing it on the ground. Now then, let's see what we got here. Thank you, Ben, by the way. She turned her attention to a pile of junk in the middle of the room, pulling this out, pushing that aside. Sewing scissors? No. Thread? Won't help. Dawn? Won't help. Curling iron? Curling iron, maybe, with Dracula's hair, but not with his rib. She pulled out an old boot, a hat, a bicycle pump. You'll find some strange things in haunted houses, she explained. Even ghosts sometimes.
Go back.
An old boot, a hat, a bicycle pump. You'll find some strange things in haunted houses, she explains.
Do bicycles even exist in Castlevania?
Holy shit! I don't know.
How would she know what a bicycle pump is?
Oh man, I've gotta. My idea.
Your suspension of disbelief is shattered. FX9. This is shoddy writing.
I'd like to point out that right above you, where that skeleton's walking back and forth, notice he's not walking in those spots. Or where he's not walking. That's because those are invisible.
Yeah, I know that.
Oh.
We're beyond.
By the way, that's water. You don't want to jump in that; it kills you.
We're beyond that.
Really? It didn't look like it. Cattiness! Okay, where was I? She pulled an old boot. You'll find some strange things in haunted houses. Even ghosts sometimes. Ah, what do you know?
Bicycle pump is totally normal, but ghosts are weird.
Here's something I think you'll be able to use. A steak. Tim blinked. What, to eat after we cook it on the barbecue with the rib? No, you clearly think in puns, young man. An unhealthy habit. No. She held up a long length of wood. A steak? Oh, thought Tim. That kind of steak. It was long and had one blunt end and one pointed end.
This is the kind of steak you'll need to deal with Dracula,
said the old woman. She thrust it into Simon's hands.
Go down the staircase past that door. Take a left at the bottom and watch out for the troll.
Pardon me. Oh, fuck, this is a really long dialogue, and I can't do that voice very well.
You'll see the dungeon to your left. There are skeletons hanging from chains. That's how you'll know you're in the right dungeon. Get past whatever monsters lurk down there, climb the steps, touch the rib with the stake, and hey, it's all yours. Bring it up here, dearies, so I can have a look at it, all right?
She started again. She started going through the junk on the floor again, humming a tune to herself, suddenly totally oblivious to the presence of the two heroes in the room. You'll give us more directions when we get back? She turned around, smiling happily upon them.
Well, of course I will, loves. And also, there might be another goodie or two that I unearthed from this pile.
On it. That wasn't supposed to sound seductive, but from now on.
Toodle off now, then. Have a good time. Mind the monsters. Oh, and if you see the spirit of Dracula pop up, give the old blackguard my worst, will you?
With that, Esmeralda Perkins turned her attention back to her work. Off then, said Simon Belmont, pointing with the stake toward the dungeon.
High five break!
Yeah! We got the heart!
That only took way longer than it needed to.
We're further in the game than we are in the book, I think. To the dungeon, said Simon Belmont, pointing with the stake towards the door.
To the broad dungeon with a bludgeon,
said Tim Bradley. And off they went. If the previous part of Berkeley Mansion had been dirty, then the dungeons below could be absolutely, undeniably, and irrefutably called totally filthy. In short, a real mess.
Maybe we should fire up the torches again, huh?
Said Tim, chilled to the bone with the cold gloom into which they were descending. No, we shall make do with white crystal. Look, see how nicely it glows, so close to the stake. This oaken stake must have magical properties as well. Good magical properties.
Well, all I can say is that I wish that good Lady Litter had given us a magical heater.
You're beginning to complain too much, Timothy Bradley. Did you think a quest of this nature would be comfortable? Tim thought about that. True. When he sat down for a game of Castlevania, it was usually in his temperature-controlled room at home, be it air-conditioned or heated.
All I can say is that this experience certainly makes me appreciate heroes more.
He rubbed his rumbling stomach.
Especially hero sandwiches. Boy, I could use one right now, with some ham, cheese, salami and lettuce, tomato, and gee, don't forget the hot peppers. Hold the mayo.
You are a very strange young man, said Simon. Tim laughed. He thought about digging into his pack for another hunk of chocolate, but he'd eaten so many that he had to admit that in this frightening and suspenseful moment, he was so chock full of chocolate that he couldn't possibly indulge himself in another. Oh my god, Ben. He couldn't indulge himself with another hunk of chocolate. It was on the lower level, just where the lady caretaker had told them to expect it, that Tim and Simon encountered the troll. It was not quite what they expected. Thus ending Chapter 11.